Good evening, everyone. Welcome to New York Avenue Presbyterian Church in both our physical and virtual spaces. It's wonderful to have all of you with us tonight for our McClendon Scholar Program. For those online, I encourage you to open the chat and sign in and share where you're tuning in from. We've got folks all over, and it's always interesting to see where everyone is. My name is Rachel Pacheco. I'm the associate pastor of this church, and it's an honor for me to especially welcome tonight all of our speakers and facilitators who will be leading us this evening. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us tonight and to share your wisdom and experience. And we always give thanks for the legacy of former Associate Pastor Jack McClendon, who so generously left funding for this program so that we as a church and a broader community can continue to learn from one another, from leaders and from experts, and to be further formed in our faith as we live in the world together. One little bit of housekeeping. As associate pastor, I am wearing many different hats tonight, so sadly I'll be in and out a bit, but one of the hats I wear is in supporting our weekly tutoring program, which happens on the 5th floor right above the sanctuary. So just after 8 o'clock, when they finish, they completely transform the space and move around all kinds of furniture, which you will hear. So when you do, you can now smile with joy in the ministry happening in this space and in hope in the young people of DC and the relationships that are being formed there. I invite you to take a deep breath. And as we settle in for the evening, please join me in prayer. Holy One, in the midst of dark and cold evenings, we give you thanks for this bright and warm place to gather. Be with us this night. Open our hearts and minds that we might learn something new and be further formed in faith together. Speak wisdom through our speakers, and may we leave more equipped to build your beloved community and to be your beloved people. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Pacheco, and thanks for having us here in this lovely space and sacred space for this event tonight. I'm Keith Allred. I'm the Executive Director of the National Institute for Civil Discourse, and on behalf of NICD, welcome to all of you. We're delighted that you've joined us tonight. I join with the Wheatley Institute at Brigham Young University, who is a co-sponsor with us of this event. I can't imagine, quite literally, a more appropriate place for us to take on this theme tonight of malice toward none in our political spaces, here in the place where Lincoln worshiped and presented such an iconic example of those immortal words. So we look forward to the elevating words that are going to be shared today as we are called to live out the ideals of malice towards none and of Christian charity, even in our politics. The National Institute for Civil Discourse, our mission is to build the nation's capacity to engage our differences more constructively. And we do that through a series of programs. And those programs we've thought really hard about of, what could we do realistically, practically, that might move the nation to a better place. I don't know about you, but I have some moments of despair when I look at our politics today, a sense that something really different is going on that's deeply troubling and destructive. And so we try to think deeply about what could be done at the magnitude of the problem. And as we looked at the problem and the resources, the sources of power in the country that reside in the nation that might be equal to the magnitude of the problem, we conceived of what we call our Golden Rule 2020 program, and it was actually conceived here in the basement of the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church. About 6 or 7 years ago, we drew about 20 faith leaders from across the country, from all the major denominations in the country, from very conservative to very liberal. And we put this problem to them of what was going on in our politics, how bitter they had become. And we put forth a thesis, at least a proposal, that religious principles and religious communities could be a powerful resource for us to get to a better place. That there was no religion that didn't teach, as a fundamental tenet, that we need to treat those who are different than us with consideration and respect. And we put that as a question then to these faith leaders of, is there a role for religious principles and religious communities to help get us to a better place? And the answer was a resounding yes. And out of that, right here in the basement, was born our Golden Rule 2020 program. And out of that came a number of great partnerships and ongoing programs where we convene in sacred places to consider the deep principles of various faith traditions that call us to treat each other with greater dignity and respect than is so often manifest in our politics today. So we could not be more honored than to be co-sponsored here in this historic and epic venue to call ourselves to the immortal words of Lincoln, that we treat each other with charity towards all, with malice towards none, and that we live out the Christian principle of charity and love even those who hatefully use us. As Governor Spencer Cox recently noted, he has looked throughout the New Testament for the exception to the second great commandment, that we love our neighbor, even those that are different, and he didn't find one for politics. And so that is our call tonight, is that it applies even and especially with politics. So thank you for coming. Thank you for the exercise of faith that you've manifest here in coming tonight with a sense of hope and faith that we could get to a better place. And I'll turn it over to our colleague Theo Brown.
Thank you, Keith. I want to add my welcome on behalf of the McClendon Scholar Program, and also begin by acknowledging our partners. It's great to work with National Institute for Civil Discourse and the Wheatley Institute. We'll say a little bit more about both of them later on and tell you how you can go online and learn about the good work that they do. As many of you know, we organize and host regular programs with prominent Christian scholars to help people of faith reflect and think about how to respond to many of the pressing issues of our time. One issue we focused on a fair amount during the last few years is what I would call Christian citizenship, and with it the various questions of our duties and responsibilities as we strive to be good citizens and work for justice and fairness in our country. A focus of these problems, of course, has been the terrible polarization that has crippled our country, and we've had numerous McClendon scholars over the last 5 or 6 years address this issue, including prominent voices such as Pete Wehner, Senator Chris Coons, David French, Krista Tippett, Amanda Tyler recently from the Baptist Joint Committee on Religious Liberty also spoke on this issue. So it's been an ongoing concern of ours, and tonight we welcome to join that ongoing conversation two distinguished Americans who'll be with us in a conversation that will be facilitated by another distinguished American who is the president of a theological seminary here in Washington, D.C. Now, tonight's topic, as Keith has already said, could not be more timely or urgent. We meet at a time of growing anger and hatred and contempt in our politics. As we all know, this toxicity in our current political climate damages the country in many different ways. And I think we also all understand that it increases the likelihood of political violence. So as we begin our discussion of this topic, I find myself reflecting on the fact that Keith already mentioned, that in fact New York Avenue Presbyterian Church was the church of the Lincoln family during the Civil War. And in light of that, we, of course, take this program title from Lincoln's own words, "With malice towards none." And this famous phrase is one to keep in mind as we wrestle with the deep divisions that we face. So I suggest that as we begin here, we invoke the spirit of Lincoln this evening and keep it in mind. As many of you know, we have the actual pew where the Lincoln family sat in the church. It's here right on the second row, near the front. I think in the original sanctuary, I understand it was on the 8th row, but the Lincoln pew was always down front and center in this church, in this place, in a different building with a similar configuration. So in this spot, right down front over here, Lincoln sat as he contemplated the future of the Union and as he prayed for the guidance to make the right decisions. And I hope and pray we and other of our fellow Americans will keep Lincoln very much in mind as we grapple with the same issue he dealt with: how to keep the animosity and deep divisions in the country from destroying us. In just a moment, we'll begin a conversation between Tim Shriver and Tom Griffith, and then after that, there'll be an opportunity for questions and discussion. If you're in the sanctuary and have a question, write it out on the card you took when you came in. We'll collect them as we get into the question period. If you don't have a card right now and you need one, raise your hand and a friendly usher will come with a card so you have one. I think there are a couple of folks here who would like one. And be thinking of a good, crisp, short question, and it may be nothing more than, "I'd like to hear you say more about such and such that you mentioned during your remarks," and we'll have a time to collect those here after the opening conversation. And for those of you online, we invite you to also ask questions. Be sure to put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat section. We have someone who'll be monitoring the Q&A and drawing out some questions that we also can share later on. Indeed, most of the people participating tonight are participating online. We had over 900 people sign up for our webinar, so we hope that from those hundreds who are online, we'll have some good questions and we'll include those as best we can. After the time of discussion and sharing of some of your questions, we'll just share some information with you, make reference to the handout you got when you came in, and also to a handout that was sent to all of you online. Maybe you haven't seen it, but today at the middle of the day, we sent a reminder about this event tonight, about the webinar, and there's a link there to this invitation to action. We'll be talking about a little bit later and invite you to look at that if you're online also. At this point, I want to invite our three guests to come forward and take their seat up here. And then I will turn the program over here to the Reverend Dr. David McAllister Wilson. David is the president of Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, and he's been in that position since 2002. I think that makes him one of the longest tenured seminary professors in the country. Overall, David has been with Wesley Theological Seminary for 40 years, and his strong leadership has helped to turn Wesley into one of the nation's leading theological schools. David, we're delighted to have you with us this evening to facilitate this discussion.
Thank you, Theo, and thanks to the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church for hosting this event tonight. I'm pleased to introduce both of our speakers, which could take a half hour each. I'm going to try to keep it much shorter. Tim Shriver is an educator, a best-selling author, and chairman of Special Olympics and Unite. As chairman of Special Olympics, Tim has driven the largest expansion of that organization in its history, growing the movement from 1 million athletes to over 6 million athletes in more than 170 countries around the world. As chairman of the nonprofit organization Unite, Tim has helped to pioneer the Dignity Index, a new tool to help Americans disagree without demonizing each other. and catalyzed dozens of moonshots that unite Americans in common purpose to tackle our country's most intractable challenges. Dr. Shriver earned his undergraduate degree from Yale University, a master's degree from Catholic University, and a doctorate in education from the University of Connecticut. Before joining the Special Olympics in 1996, he co-founded and currently chairs the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. He also has used the power of Hollywood to spread hope and connection across differences as the executive producer of several films, including Amistad, the Loretta Claiborne story, The Ringer, Front of the Class, As Far as They Can Run, and The Peanut Butter Falcon. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Fully Alive, Discovering What Matters Most, and co-editor of The Call to Unite. But in some ways, the most interesting thing to say about Tim is that it is 32 degrees outside, it's night, feels like 26, and he rode his bicycle to this meeting. Our other guest here, I think, drove.
Yes, I drove.
He is Thomas Griffith. He was appointed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit by President George W. Bush in 2005, after his nomination was confirmed with bipartisan support in the Senate. He stepped down from the court in 2020 and now spends the lion's share of his time pushing back against the toxic polarization that he believes is the most serious threat to the Constitution our nation faces. In this effort, he works closely with Governor Spencer Cox of Utah. Governor Cox said, "Judge Tom Griffith is one of the most eloquent and principled voices in America on the subject of civic charity. His wisdom has profoundly shaped my understanding of healthy conflict and the moral imperative to engage across our differences." A graduate of Brigham Young University, the University of Virginia, and the University of Virginia Law School. Currently, Judge Griffith is a lecturer on law at Harvard, a fellow at the Wheatley Institute at Brigham Young, a member of the board of directors of iCivics and Interfaith America, and special counsel at the law firm of Hunton, Andrews, and Kurth. He is among a handful of conservatives who President Biden appointed to the President's Commission on the Supreme Court. Long active in rule of law efforts in the former communist nations of Eastern Europe, Tom is part of an international group of 12 legal experts that vet applications for the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. I remember in Vatican Square, as the new Pope came out on the balcony, and there was a man standing next to him, and I couldn't quite figure out who it is, but the nun next to me said, "Hey, who's that up there with Tom Griffith?" Would you please welcome our guests? Let me begin with a question to both of you about your faith. As defined in the book of Hebrews, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. I want to ask about the faith that brings you to this discussion. I'm not asking for a confessional faith here. Instead, here's what I perceive about both of you. Tim, in your book, The Call to Unite, you said, "Communities flourish when they unite, suffer when they separate." That sounds like an article of faith, which you hold despite evidence to the contrary. True?
It's true that I hold that conviction. I'm not sure there's much evidence to the contrary. Maybe we could get into that. But first, let me just say thank you, David, for being here, Theo, Keith, the pastoral team here. This is like a VIP audience. This is one of these audiences where everybody here has a role, and you're all thinking, why am I not on the stage? So I fully respect that. I want to, in a special way, acknowledge just arrived Governor Herbert, who has been such an influential, former Governor Herbert of the state of Utah, who has been even before Governor Cox's extraordinary celebrity and rightful position as a powerful leader in this work, has also pioneered the political art of being strong in your principles and being open in your ways of solving problems. So just thanks to that. And you mentioned, if I could just, David, say it, you mentioned the Loretta Claiborne story, which is probably the first film I worked on. So in the audience tonight is Loretta Claiborne.
Oh my
So I'd
goodness.
ask Loretta, would you stand up? Loretta Claiborne, who's the subject of... probably the most prominent single figure in the history of the Special Olympics movement, maybe on a par with my mom, as one of the really legendary Americans who's advocated for not just the dignity of people with intellectual challenges, but the dignity of every human being. And I've learned as much about the work I'm doing now from Loretta as I've learned from any other source or any other place. You asked me about faith. My conviction is that we're all children of God, and that we have a lot of evidence to that effect. There's a beautiful expression. You mentioned the word hope. There's a beautiful teaching from a monk named Thomas Keating, who died a few years ago, and follower of Thomas Merton. I don't know how many people are, I'm sure many Merton followers. The anniversary of his death was yesterday. I don't know if you remember that. In 1968, he died on December 10th. Keating says that the theological virtue of hope is not about things in the future. The theological virtue of hope is being able to be attentive to the hope that is given to you in the moment. And he concludes this beautiful, I won't get the quote exactly right, but that the energies of God are passing by you in every nanosecond of time. Why not reach out and grab them by continuing acts of self-surrender? I think that the spiritual practices of our many traditions find a common grounding in the idea that within us is the presence, is the evidence of things hoped for, which is us in some ways. So I think this work comes, when people have overcome a lot of bias. I mean, again, I'd love to have Loretta speak maybe later in the program, but people with intellectual disabilities in this country, when Loretta was born, there was 200,000 people that are her brothers and sisters who are in institutions in this country because of the Supreme Court, which authorized the forced sterilization and institutionalization of people with intellectual disabilities.
Why did you put your arm on me? I wasn't
I'm
part
just
of
saying
that. I wasn't part of that.
Weren't you on the court in
No,
1927? No, but I mean, so we've missed it a lot. I think we all have to just own that the problem of missing the dignity of other human beings is a fundamental human problem. And every time we miss it, we make huge mistakes. We make it in our families. We make it with our friends. If I miss it, you can look back on your own life and say, geez, I missed it. So that's my faith. My faith starts there. Of course, when you offered confession, I thought to myself, you got a collar on, and I'm a Catholic. I'm about to confess and hope for absolution. But I think the conviction we have as Americans around the equality of every human being mirrors the scriptural and traditional teaching of the dignity of every human being.
And I've heard you speak about how your work in Special Olympics has informed your thinking about the discussion we're having tonight, about how we can achieve a kind of unity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your mic went out.
We're having a mic problem.
There you go.
There you go.
Go back on.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to let Tom jump in. But yes, I mean, I grew up in the Special Olympics movement. The Special Olympics movement was founded in Rockville, Maryland, about 8 miles from here by my mom, who opened her swimming pool in 1962 to children with special needs because there was no camp and no place for them to go. That's why she did it, not because she was trying to be heroic, because she'd heard too many mothers say, there's nothing for my child. And those of us who are parents, or those of us who loved parents, or those of us who admire parents know what it's like for a parent to feel there's nothing for your child. It broke her heart. So she said, yes, there is. There's something. And you bring your child to my house. And we're going to have a camp. And we were very lucky to have a big farm-like backyard out there in Rockville in those days. So I grew up around that energy. The world doesn't see your child as mattering. The world doesn't see your child as being important. I do. They're wrong. Bring your child here. There's only one way to look at it, because if you've got someone, and let's be honest about it, if you've got someone with a 140 IQ and someone with a 70 IQ, or if you've got someone with enormous privilege and power and someone with no privilege or power, the world will almost invariably tell you to value one and devalue the other. It's almost impossible to resist that message. It will flash at you. You only can resist it with a hard, in my view, earned effort to see beyond the distortions of power and fame and wealth and all those things. But when you see beyond it, it's like, most people, like I say to people, if this were a Special Olympics race up here on the stage, and it was a 50-yard dash, and you saw a bunch of athletes line up at 12 years old, 14 years old with Down syndrome, and they're running across the stage, half of you would be in tears. Because you'd watch at the end of the race, and the arms would go up, and nobody remembers who won. And you see a mom over here, so proud of her daughter, so proud of her son, you'd be like, and it's a release. It's like, oh my God. Yes, it's true. I had it wrong. Look at that beautiful. That's a great athlete. That's a beautiful human being. So look, I think we can't gloss over differences. We'll get to that, I hope. The substantive, meaningful, moral challenges of our time in which you or I may differ. And when we do, I want you to speak forcefully with passion about things that you differ with me on, and I want to be able to do the same with you. But we can find a way to do that without violating your dignity, without telling you you don't matter, without telling you you're lesser, worse, inferior, evil, because of your conviction, even if those convictions might be morally challenging.
Thank you. Tom, if I think about our conversations over the last few years, if I had to identify an article of faith for you, it's a faith in the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law. Is that right?
Yes, but it's not my primary allegiance. St. Thomas More, when he died, his last words before he was executed, St. Thomas More, I die the king's good servant, but God's first. So I hope that my faith is in something greater than that. Can I speechify just for a second? I am in awe that I am in this space. I really am. That sitting, I went and sat on the Lincoln bench. I took a video of it, sent to my grandkids. They know how I feel about Abraham Lincoln. To be in a space where he worshiped, and more than that, I mean, I know the history of this church. This church has been in the forefront of fighting for human dignity. And to be here with these people who I love and admire in this space, I can't think of anything better. So I'm grateful to be here. Okay, but back to my faith. So I do have faith in the Constitution, and I'm going to speak to that in a second. But primarily, I'm a Christian. I practice my Christianity as a Latter-day Saint, and that means I believe we are on the winning side of history. The biblical narrative, the biblical story, is that Christ is going to win. It's going to look dark at times, but he's going to win. He is our God. He is our Lord. And so we're going to win. And so therefore, any effort we make in that regard to follow him, to mimic him, to copy him, anything we do in that regard is worthwhile and valuable and important, even when the evidence isn't too compelling that it's working right now, right? But we'll get to that thing. But no, let's get to the Constitution. I'm here as a judge, right? I'm not here as a pastor or a preacher, but that is my primary.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I do. I took an oath to uphold and support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I happen to believe that God acts in history and has done so in some remarkable ways does so amongst every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. He's active and involved. And I happen to believe that the principles upon which the Constitution of the United States were formed are inspired, are informed by that, by the sense of dignity, of justice, of liberty, of the rule of law. So yeah, I do have faith in the Constitution. For better or for worse, I think for better. The history of the United States of America has been a remarkable one. As I know you guys hate this when conservatives do this, but we learned this from Ronald
I'll
Reagan.
reserve judgment
Watch
on
this.
what you're about
Watch
to
this.
do.
I learned this from Ronald Reagan. Here we go. President Clinton used to say, you like
Very
that?
good, very good.
No, President Clinton, it was great. He said, there is nothing that is wrong about America that can't be fixed by that which is right about America. And when President Biden had me as one of the token conservatives on his commission, that's fine. I think there were 5 of us out of 35 or so who you would say were center right. And a lot of people were critical of the president for that. We weren't. We said 5 out of 35. Conservatives are better represented here than in any faculty lounge in the nation. So we
Well,
felt,
that's changing. You'll be happy.
No, but President Biden, when he met with us, was so eloquent in talking about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. And what he said about the Declaration of Independence, he said, we have never achieved its goals, its aspirations, but we've never given up on it. And so that's my faith in the American people and our commitment to the principles that underlie the Constitution.
Well, let's then turn to the topic for tonight. There's nothing new about political violence in America. Ask any person of color. But there is a new surge. In an article in the Wall Street Journal this past weekend, Peggy Newton reported that the first half of 2025 saw approximately 150 politically motivated attacks. A report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies finds worldwide that terrorist attacks and plots against government targets motivated by partisan political beliefs have nearly tripled over the past 5 years compared to the previous 25 years. What do you two think is the cause of this surge in political violence?
Tim will answer that for you, and then...
Well, I think you make one very important point, which is that we've always had a lot of violence in this country. We, for whatever reason, have been more comfortable with violence than many countries over the course of our history. And I'm sure there's people in the room who have experienced or lost people that they love because of violence. I have. So political violence is not a new dimension, certainly in the life of anybody who's lived the same length of time that those of us on stage have lived and live today. The recent attack on Governor Shapiro, the murders in Minnesota, the murder in Utah, and the countless other acts of violence against LDS people in church, Catholic children, Jewish worshipers, mark a spiraling, in my view, of a certain normalization of violence. My view is that there's a lot of factors. It's a little bit kind of academic in some ways. I think, me and my colleagues, we talk about the contempt industrial complex. You draw a little circle, and you put on one corner of one angle of the circle the algorithm, and then you draw a line halfway around the circle, and you connect that to what I'd call partisan news, not information news, not traditional journalism, but partisan opinion news, and then draw the next line over to the most partisan of political forces. And you put those three together, and you have a $2 trillion business. And it's super, super profitable at a scale we've never seen before. And it's in your pocket and everybody's pocket right now. And if you're an average American, you've seen probably 3 to 5 examples of hateful rhetoric today. Whereas historically, you might have seen them on the news once a month, or you might have seen them even less more commonly. So this virus, this toxin that normalizes hatred, it doesn't normalize differences of opinion. It actually threatens differences of opinion. It normalizes hatred and contempt, the dehumanization of the other. It doesn't just normalize it, it rewards it. We all do this. Did you see this one? Linda, let me send it, my wife's, I'm going to forward this one to you. They really got him this time. Oh, look at this one. This one really makes him look like a jerk. Share this, post this on your thing. So we're all wound up in finding stuff. We're almost invited. Find the most toxic, hateful, dehumanizing information and share it. And then everybody gets paid.
Yeah.
And our children, as Governor Cox said the other night, lose their lives, literally. This is an attack on the mental health, on the viability of families, on the potential for institutions to function, and on the idea that we can solve our problems without violence. So that's a new dimension of life. It's not going, we're not going to put it back into the bottle, no. But it is a new thing. Like, we know when you're a teacher, you're teaching kids how to manage stuff, right? So you teach kids how to manage going to the grocery store. You know, when I was a teacher, you know, go to the grocery store, making lists with your parent, things like that, how to manage TV, how to manage your peers, how to manage a fight on the playground. Now we got a new thing to learn how to manage, all of us. There's a beautiful piece in the Times on this, on St. Augustine, who also struggled with this. Yes. How do you manage your attention? And he ended up, I don't know if any of you saw the piece, beautiful piece, this reflection on Augustine and this character Alypius, who becomes wound up in the violence of the killing of human beings, of the massacre of human, and wound up in it, the bloodthirstiness of it. All of a sudden, what he had loathed, he became to hunger for, to see the blood. So we've got to figure out a new set of strategies, all of us individually and collectively, for how we don't buy into that system, how we check, because when you forward, remember, when you forward, you pay. Right? So it's not just, oh, this was a really good one, I'm just sending it to my girlfriend or my boyfriend, whoever it is. You're now rewarding the person who made it. We all, I mean, and it's not you, it's me. So we're all wound up in this new system, and we, you know, Tom, my colleague Tom Rochard, who's here, Tammy Pfeiffer, Susan Solney, they're all here with Loretta and my wife, and we have a good showing here from our team. But, you know, Thomas reminds us that contempt operates by disguise. When you forward, when you read the post that attacks the person you think should be attacked, whoever that is, you think it's not contemptuous. You think it's right.
Yeah.
Because contempt operates in disguise. Scriptures teach this. Jesus tried to make this point, you know, the plank and the splinter. He's like, he was really quite a master. I mean, whatever else he was a really good psychologist. And he was very good at saying, you know, you're so easy. You're pointing the finger at, you know, here and here. Keith, why isn't Keith doing more? And why is this guy? You know, he's like, watch yourself. Be careful. Contempt seeps into us. So anyway, I think that's a big factor. That's a long answer. Tom, now tell us the truth.
I agree. So political violence has been with us forever. It's awful. Should be decried wherever it has. There's something different about this moment, however. Yeah. And the political scientists call it affective polarization. Affective with an A, emotional. That what's happening now, and since we've been studying this, we've never seen it at the levels it is now, where it's not just that Democrats and Republicans disagree with one another. That's good. We're in a democracy. I hope we disagree about everything. It's that they now feel that the other side is immoral or evil. 70% of Democrats feel that about Republicans. 70% of Republicans feel that about Democrats. It can't work. This system, this Constitution that I've revered so much, cannot work with that level of contempt. In fact, the level of enmity that social scientists discover in America right now, it rivals the level of enmity between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. You think that's bad? Next, it rivals the level of enmity between Palestinians and Israelis. Now, we're not accustomed to thinking of ourselves. Yeah, we've got our problems, but we're not like that. No, we are like that. And it's coming from many different sources. Tim identified the one that's newest to us and that seems most toxic to us. I do a lot of speaking on college campuses and to law schools, and I plead with them. I said, look, you're not going to do, you shouldn't be on social media, you shouldn't be watching cable, you shouldn't be listening to talk radio. I know you're not going to do you're not going to listen to me when I say any of that stuff, but can I at least tell you that you realize that when you are consuming information from social media, when you're consuming, I'm not going to call it news, when you're consuming information from cable, when you're consuming information from talk radio, you're being played. Okay, you're being played, and it's dollar driven, right? There's not breaking news every 10 minutes in the world, except there is on cable, and there is for one reason, because from neuroscience and practical experience, we learn when people there's a sense of outrage, eyes will go on screen, revenue dollars go up. This is Governor Cox said it the other night. This is the opioid crisis of our time. Yeah. The social media companies, and I hope I'm not offending anyone here, but the social media companies and what they are doing to all of us is done with full knowledge of the results, full knowledge of what it does to us. That's the new element. We've never had that before, and that just puts this whole level of enmity on steroids. And there are crazy people out there who respond to it. So,
we've spoken of how important it is to be in this sacred space, and we've done a lot of programs in sacred spaces. But I need to point out that the polls show that religion is often a driver of this polarization, even contributing to political violence. Indeed, acts of political violence often seem religious in their passionate certainty. What should people of faith do with their sense of righteous anger?
Act on it without becoming the evil you oppose. That's, we spent a year or two reading scapegoat theory and reading the theologians of scapegoating, one of whom, one of the great writers, James Allison, concludes that the example, of, at least in the Christian tradition, of Jesus on the cross is the example of the human being or the God figure who tries to tell us how to end evil without becoming evil.
Yeah.
Now, it's easier said than done. It's a real spiritual gift, if you ask me, to be able to, if I hear, so like, sometimes you just get these academic conversations, but let's say, I'm guessing Tom and I disagree. Probably seriously. I'm told you were very active in the gun rights decisions. Am I right about that? I'm just using this for an example, just for fun. No, so what I would say is...
Yeah, I get a chance to explain.
Okay. Yes, okay. Yeah. All right, so what I would say is, let's just say Tom issued a decision, forget what it was. I'm sorry to say.
No, I did. I wrote a couple of opinions.
Okay. Which I would disagree with, probably. I'm guessing I would disagree. I don't think Tom wants me to go, you should be nice to me and not tell me that you disagree with me, or you should be centrist and balanced in your view, not take your passion seriously. Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. Again, to quote my colleague Tom Rosher, differences of opinion are not the problem. In a democracy, differences of opinion are the solution to problems. That's how we solve problems, by giving everyone a chance to have their opinion heard. That's the whole premise of a vote. You get an opinion, you get an opinion. That's how we solve problems. We don't say everybody votes the same. We say you get to vote. That's how we solve problems. So differences of opinion are not the problem. Treating someone with contempt is the problem. That's a different variable. So you can march, you can lay down your body, you can protest, you can stand outside buildings, you can write op-eds or social media posts, do all of that. Don't become a doormat. That's certainly not the premise of our work with the Dignity Index. The premise of our work is that you can do all that without becoming the evil you loathe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I am going to explain my decision.
Tried to trap him.
No, I'd say the same thing. No, you act on your righteous anger. The question is, how do you act? That's the whole point. How do you act? And so I'm going to invoke the spirit of Lincoln here, sitting on the second row. I mean, the greatest second inaugural ever given is Abraham Lincoln's, right? And the words he uttered are part of our American canon. We are not enemies, but friends. Who was he talking about when he said that? He was talking about slaveholders in the South who tried to destroy the United States of America. And yet Abraham Lincoln said, we are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. How do you do that? I don't know, but that's what we have to do. That's what we're called to do, to figure out how to passionately favor your rights. I mean, look, I have political views. I think I'm right. I mean,
Well, you're not.
I might be wrong, but I mean, I wouldn't hold them if I thought I was wrong, right? I think they're right, but the way you go about pursuing them is what we're talking about here. You do it with recognizing the dignity and respect of the others. So my favorite Christian author, one of the C.S. Lewis. I mean, who doesn't like C.S. Lewis? Raise your hands if you don't like C.S. Lewis. No, see, everyone likes C.S. Lewis. So just a little name dropping. So just last week I was in Oxford. I was at I go there regularly, and I have this little pilgrimage where I always go to the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin, which is where Lewis delivered what I think is the greatest sermon he ever gave. It's called The Weight of Glory. And I go there, and I read it again, and at the end of his sermon, this is what he says, and I think, I wish I lived my life like this. I aspire to. He said, next to the Blessed Sacrament itself. Okay, just pause that for a second. Next to the Blessed Sacrament itself, your neighbor is the holiest object presented to your senses. Now that's a high standard. I'm daily condemned by that, but I think that's right. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about pulling your punches on key issues. Liberty, equality are critical, and we need to be outspoken advocates and zealous advocates for that. But we need to realize that the people we disagree with so passionately and who are so wrong, right? We need to treat them with dignity and respect. Okay, now 30 seconds. Okay, yeah, I wrote a couple of opinions that said that an individual has a right under the Second Amendment to possess a firearm. Okay, now, I want you to know, I think the Second Amendment is really bad. I would like to repeal the Second Amendment. But in my analysis, no, that's what it said. And as a judge, I have to follow the law. So anyway, yeah. So it's true. For about a year, I was like the poster child judge of the NRA, and I can promise you that is something I never ever aspire to. Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Back on track.
Counterpoint? No, just kidding.
Back on track.
Yeah.
This history is made here tonight.
There you go.
Yeah. Well,
No, I'm a gun control.
What a beautiful
guy.
C.S. Lewis quote. Thank you for that. But I think we should also, just in the context of this question, remember that the part of the second inaugural we are alluding to with the mouse, anybody could Google it, and are with firmness in the right.
yes.
As God gives us to know the right.
Yes.
Okay? So Lincoln doesn't say charity for all, malice toward none, and I'm a doormat.
Right.
Firmness in the right is the third part of that clause. People often forget it, right? So he's capable, he's holding, this is, I do think this is a gift that we all have to kind of try to nurture, because you're actually asking a human being to hold competing energy at the same time. I am firm in the right. Tom is wrong about X, or Tim is wrong. I am firm in my conviction that God calls me to oppose Tom or David or whoever it is. And yet, I hold also no malice. That's not just, that's not just a rule you can sort of inscribe on your code of conduct or whatever. That's a gift of, I think, well-nurtured capacity to hold tension, to hold the already and the not yet of the Christian story, to be able to hold the idea that redemption is at hand and yet it is still off in the future. How do you hold these things? That God is risen and yet not here. These are all moments in religious teachings, and they occur in all our traditions, where we're being asked to hold two things that would to the mind appear to be in opposition, but to the soul actually make sense.
And that second inaugural seems a seasoned wisdom to be compared with his call for the better angels in the first inaugural. And what had happened in between, and yet he can still say that, but with a firmness of conviction.
And going back to the first inaugural, I mean, that fell on deaf ears, right? We are
Right.
not enemies, but friends. I mean, but it didn't work, and we are still living with the consequences of that today. That his counsel and advice was not heeded. The country fell into civil war, and we still live in a country that was in many ways defined by that conflict. So
We're hoping tonight ends in some really helpful, practical advice for individuals. Could you say a word about the Dignity Index?
Yeah. So you all have it. I think Tammy or Susan or passed around that little sort of oversized index card. Yeah, you've got it there. This was an attempt on our part to try to go from the idea of giving platitudinous advice to people. Be nice, be kind, treat everybody with dignity, that's so nice. And then you get out in the church parking lot and everybody's cutting you off and you're flipping the bird. Not if you're an LDS, but the rest of us. So this was an attempt to try to get beyond platitudes and actually equip people with a skill, like an actual tactical, objective skill. So the index, after being normed and validated at the University of Utah, thanks to the state of Utah and Taylor Randall, as the president of that university, helped us do the social science to norm and validate this index. So it has some objective credibility. It's not Tim's version or Tom's version. And it grades in very distinctive gradients the way in which you characterize, it only grades one thing. It doesn't grade facts, doesn't grade moral quality. It just grades how you treat another human being when you disagree. That's it. How do you treat them? Doesn't say you're right or wrong, they're right or wrong. It just says this is how you're treating someone. So from 4 down, you see increasing levels of contempt. From we're good, we're against them, to they're not good people, it's us versus them, to when you drop down below that, it's not good and bad, it's evil at stake here. This church isn't big enough for all of us, it's us or them. And then at the bottom of the scale is you don't deserve to live. That's how bad you are for having that opinion, for believing that idea. 5 and up goes the opposite direction. 5 and up would be Tom listening to me on gun rights and me listening to Tom. Let's keep coming back to it because it's so much fun. But a 6 would be an exchange of ideas that's deeper. I would call a 5 a good listener. A 6 becomes more curious. You see it's on the back, some of these skills. Wait a minute, we don't necessarily agree, but I want to know more. That's a 6. Tell me more about where, we must have common ground on this. We can find it. A 7 jumps up a little higher. I'd call the key word there humility. We don't agree, but I'm still curious about the things we don't agree on. It's not just finding the good. We've got to, I want to understand. And you hear this telltale sign with a 7. I might be wrong. I'm not wrong necessarily, but I might be. But that's a 7. That's a human being in a conversation, being willing to be open. And an 8 is the kind of, we see from Lincoln, we see from people like Mandela, Dr. King, and many other great leaders, who will just say to, look, no matter, you read these beautiful things from Desmond Tutu where he's in a post-apartheid country where the crimes committed against his brothers and sisters were equivalent to the crimes committed against people who were enslaved in many respects in this country. And yet he held this idea that even in those people who had committed heinous crimes, he could see, as he liked to say, a depth of humanity that was the same as his own. Which is why, like progressives, so this feels like a slightly progressive-leaning organization, say, well, wait a minute, what about this person? Yeah. They don't deserve dignity. I said, well, what about people on death row? Did they deserve to be treated with dignity? I think the courts have said yes, right?
To what?
To treating prisoners with dignity.
Yes.
God, definitely. I hope so, jeez.
And people who are rounded up by immigration agents should be treated with dignity as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Forgotten these days, yeah.
So that's the scale. But the reason it's, I hope, of some value as you look at it, is that it first and most shockingly, as we started working with this, most people were less interested in judging Herbert, who's running for governor, versus someone else who's running for governor or senator. We thought that would be helpful, right? We'd make politicians want to have more dignity. But what people actually were interested in is changing their own behavior. We call it the mirror effect. And here's how the mirror effect works. You score yourself right now. You're already experts. This is not hard to learn, the Dignity Index. Just look down at it and score yourself the last time you talked politics. And I won't ask you to confess.
No, I think we ought to have groups stand up. All the ones stand up. We're friends.
Yeah. So most people, the average score by our rough math is about a 2.5. Little bit, I'd say closer to 3. But when people will tell us, they'll say, yes, when I called my friend this morning and I talked about Trump or I talked about Biden or whoever you're talking, it was a 2. He's a horrible person. He doesn't deserve to stay in this country. We've got to expunge him or whoever it is. That's the way we talk. But you don't think you're being contemptuous. You just think you're right. You can be right without being contemptuous, and that's what the index, in some ways, I think has been the gift we've found that we enjoy watching and teaching. On the back, you'll see skills to actually, these are skills we teach. You can teach 3rd graders, you can teach 6th graders. You could teach members of Congress if they would listen. But they're not actually complex skills, but they're very important skills. Self-regulation skills, curiosity skills, relationship skills. You're seeing them on the back of the card. They just help you hold this tension, to be firm in the right, and yet to have charity for all and malice toward none.
I'm a big fan of the Dignity Index. This is a powerful, powerful tool for self-regulation, but also I do hope it crosses over so that people will make a decision on their candidates saying, I like her tax policies, but does she have to be so nasty about her opponent? And actually, there was a time when character counted in politics, and it wasn't that long ago. And I'd love to see it cross over to there. So here's my practical thing. So I'm supposed to be, I'm representing, I'm supposed to be a conservative here, right? I mean, I was said a conservative. So I used to be involved in politics. I was a Republican. I was appointed by George W. Bush. I was one of those Republicans, Jack Kemp, George Bush. We had a name for it. It was called compassionate conservatism. Michael Gerson. I was in that. Then I become a judge, and you stop thinking about yourself in terms of political orientation. And then I stepped down from being a judge, and I thought, I guess I can get back in politics again. But I couldn't find the party I belonged to. It disappeared. The party I belonged to didn't exist anymore. So I now call myself a post-partisan conservative. So as a post-partisan conservative, let me give all of us some practical advice. And I think I'm making a guess about folks at New York Avenue Pres. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but my guess is there aren't too many MAGA folks in your congregation. There may be a couple that you don't know about, not too many MAGA. That's just my guess. So here would be my assignment to all of us. Do you know a MAGA person? If you don't, they're out there. There are plenty of them. find one, take that person to lunch, pay for the lunch, and then at the lunch, just ask questions. Just listen. Listen to why that person feels the way they do. I have a theory. I'm not MAGA. I've never. How many times can you write in Mitt Romney? That's what I want to know, right? I just can't, you know. So I've never voted for President Trump, and I'm not fond of him or the way he goes about doing things. But I'll say this: I have a theory for why MAGA is so powerful, and it comes down to the idea that when people are humiliated, they don't respond well, right? We learned that after the First World War, right? And the way Germany was humiliated, and look what they did. The MAGA world has been humiliated by elites, by us, right? We've made fun of their religion. I'm not an Obama hater. I'm a big fan of President Obama. I never voted for him. He voted for me. I never returned the favor. Okay, but I'm sorry, President Obama. You don't make fun of people's adherence to their guns and their God. No, we don't talk about our fellow citizens that way. Mrs. Clinton, you don't call your fellow citizens deplorables. That's not what we do. That's not what Lincoln would have done. Okay, Mitt Romney, you don't call 47% of the people in America takers. We find different ways to describe the issues we're talking about without engaging in those attacks on people personally, because people don't respond well to being humiliated. And my back-of-the-envelope anthropological, sociological, political analysis, for what it's worth, of what we're having today is we have humiliated these people for decades, and now they are really ticked off. And it's a tough time to try and say, okay, well, let's sit down and let's break bread together and have peace with one another. But that's what we need to do. That's what we absolutely need to do. You and I'm in the same boat, I'm closer to you on this than you might think, need to sit down with those folks and understand, what is it that worries you so much? What is it that you favor so much? What do you want? And just listen. Just listen. And the greatest judge who never made it on the Supreme Court was a judge named Learned Hand. Is that a great name? Learned Hand. He was a judge in New York City, a federal judge, and back during World War II, he gave a speech in Central Park that 1 million people attended. It's called The Spirit of Liberty. There was an age when everyone read that in their civics assignments in high school. The takeaway line from Judge Hand's talk on the Spirit of Liberty, and I'm gonna mangle it, I'm not gonna quote it, I'll have to paraphrase. He said, the spirit of liberty is the spirit that is not too sure of itself. The spirit of liberty is the spirit that seeks to understand the minds of others. That's the spirit of liberty. And then he said, and then he famously quoted Oliver Cromwell. I know, a dicey guy to quote, in places, but Oliver Cromwell had this great quote that's attributed to him during the Puritan Revolution when he said, I beseech ye in the bowels of Christ, think that ye might be mistaken.
He was about Catholics.
Yeah, that's
Cromwell.
right.
Yeah.
And Judge Hand said he would like to have that phrase emblazoned over every courthouse, every legislature, every school, every church in America. So part of this take a MAGA to lunch thing, you know what? We might learn something. We might be missing something from what we see is going on in America today, and we might be missing it. And we might be able to learn from that. So that's my practical assignment. It's take a MAGA to lunch. It may be at Thanksgiving dinner, right? I mean, you may have already had that experience, but to take someone who has a very different view than you do and just listen. Don't try and persuade. The social scientists tell us that, no one changes their mind about issues. No one does. So you're not there to change their mind, but you're there to learn from them, and maybe you'll change your mind about them. and then maybe they'll change their mind about you. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about getting away from disagreement. We're Americans. I want us to disagree over everything. I don't trust any decision from any entity that isn't the product of disagreement, whether that's my pastor's office, the White House, the Supreme Court, whatever. I want to know that every proposition has been thought through and has been argued over. So it's not getting rid of disagreement, but it's getting rid of the contempt for the other side and disagreement. So that's my, take a MAGA to lunch. There's my, and hand of the dignity index.
Well, we're going to turn to Q&A in a moment, but I want to ask for your short answer to this question. My question is, what gives you cause for hope now? Mine is the sound of the class moving.
Yours is what? I didn't hear
the sound of the class moving the chairs.
The tutor session has ended.
Yeah.
Look, I think we've told ourselves a terrible story about who we are, which I don't think is true. I think it's a lie. What's going on upstairs is a great example. But I don't think that's unique.
No.
You know, my wife is working on the refugee resettlement group with Holy Trinity and 3 other churches across town. They do extraordinary work for very humble, very needy human beings who are here legally, desperate. And there's going at 50, 60 people picking up clothing and mattresses and driving around town and helping out. And the list goes on and on and on. This is still a country of enormous innovation. It is still a country of enormous compassion. It is still a country, I look at the Special Olympics movement, 500,000 volunteers, get nothing, zero, not a penny, usually not a plaque. And they line that track and they serve the water and they make the stand for athletes to stand on and they put on the ribbons and they're cops and they're teachers and they're Lions Clubs members. What's the motto of Lions Clubs? We serve. Created in this country, all over the world. It's still, that story exists. A huge part of the problem is we don't hear that story.
No.
And so we become convinced, people will say, wow, that's amazing that you're doing that. But the country's a shit show, excuse me. Sorry. Sorry, Herbert I just got his attention. No, but you think to yourself, well, wait a second, is that the country, or is what you're going to get tonight when you get home on the news the country? Which is a real country? I don't think it's really close. The data shows that the hatred part of the country is real, but it's relatively small.
Yeah.
It's relatively small numbers, highly amplified into becoming the appearance of the national narrative. But if you have 10% of the country who's hateful on either side, and that may be, I'm sorry to say, a fair number, then you got 80% of the people who are upstairs. That's 80% of us, 70%, depending on the numbers you look.
The better angels of our being.
Yeah, but that's. I bet everyone in this room has a story like that.
Yeah.
I bet everyone in this room has a story like that. And when Lincoln sat there, he was watching stories like that. In the midst of the Civil War with 500,000 people lying dead on battlefields. He was still seeing that. So that doesn't excuse the horrors of slavery or the destruction of war or the virulent hatred of people in the political spectrum right now. But it does remind us that they don't have the last word, and they don't even have the dominant word. There's another version of us, and we need to remember it.
Well, I agree. Amen. I concur. But I'll add one thing since we're in a church. I'm hopeful because I believe that on that Easter Sunday, something miraculous happened. And I believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ and that he began a new creation that he calls us to be part of. And we're on his team when we're doing this. When we're seeking reconciliation, he's with us. And even though it doesn't look great right now, it's not the end of the game. The end of the game is we're going to win. But it's going to be hard work. It's going to require all of us to be the better angels.
C.S. Lewis would say, Aslan is on the move.
Aslan is on the move.
And we would say the Prince of Peace.
Aslan is on the move. We heard Aslan on the move tonight.
Yes, we have.
We have a few minutes, and we do want to have time for some questions. If you have a question you've written out, raise it up, and an usher will come get it, and we'll sort through and pick some of these and answer as many as we can, and ask our very eloquent guests to be brief in answering the questions.
That's
so
directed
we
at
can
me.
hear from several.
Can you guys do that?
Right.
What's the word?
Brief.
Oh,
Let
me-
me. Not a legal brief.
No, okay.
Let me start with a question or two as we're gathering these. While it's easy for us to call out people on, if you will, the other side for contemptuous things they say or language that would be, it seems to me like it's particularly important that we correct and challenge people on our own side. And I wonder if you agree with that, and kind of any thoughts about how we call people out or challenge, particularly our own, in terms of the language they use.
Hardest thing to do, and the most urgent in this moment, is because if you call out, let's just say this is a progressive room, and if I call out progressives, I run the risk I'm going to be demonized by you guys because I've violated the trust. We all agree, let's just say hypothetically, we all agree Biden was a fantastic president and Trump is a terrible president. Let's just hypothetically say that. If I were to say, well, I agree, but everybody's like, wait a minute, who is this guy? Is he on our team or not? You're supposed to have 100% fidelity in order to keep belonging, and I want to belong. So it's very tough and absolutely essential. I've been disappointed in even the best of our political leaders that they, and I'm going to say specifically about Republicans, their unwillingness to call out the president when he uses contemptuous, dehumanizing, hateful language, not because of his positions, but because of the corrosive nature of that. It's very difficult to find people on that side. Now, you see what I just did? I just conveniently said the problem's over there, right? We need to do this. We, if I'm speaking collectively as a center-left person, I'm a little bit like Tom. I'm not sure which party I'm in anymore, but we have a lot of hate on the progressive side. I don't know if everybody agrees with me on that, but there is a lot of very hateful rhetoric that comes from progressives about those people. And I hold myself up to the standard of trying as best I can to challenge it, even though I sometimes agree with the underlying political position that hatred is carrying. So I agree with you. Sorry, I didn't do the brief.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, same thing. It's it takes courage to stand up to your own, and if you were an office holder, if you're a Republican office holder these days, and with the primary system the way it is now, and you know who's going to be voting in the primary, if you want to hold on to your office, I don't judge these folks. They are in a really tough spot. But at the end of the day, it takes courage. But we all grew up, at least I'm older than many people here, I grew up on the book Profiles in Courage. Loved that book. And there was a TV, this is before your time, they actually did a TV series about it. Yeah, okay, and that was like my favorite show. Someone pointed out to me, have you noticed that President Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, is a very slender volume? Yeah, it's a slender volume, but that's what we're called to do. We have to do it.
We talked about trying to avoid talking about people as evil, and certainly on the contempt part of that. A couple of questions about someone giving the example online of Jesus kicking over the tables in the temple and being very angry, upset, confronting that. What do we do if we think something really is evil that's being done? How do we respond to that in a passionately disagree kind of way?
Well, our simple premise here is that you attack programs, policies, outcomes, and positions. You just don't attack people. Don't demonize people. Jesus does a pretty good job of this. I'm not going to act like I'm as arrogant as to say whether I'm judging Jesus. That's not my point. My point is that the Scripture has plenty of contemptuous language from the beginning to the end. And we all know you can proof text any point of view you want from Scripture. Slavery was justified by Scripture. Anti-slavery was justified by Scripture. We can't go to Scripture to prove one point or another, but we can recognize that the best way to advance your position is not to dehumanize the person you're against. The best way to make an enemy for your cause is to demonize the person who disagrees with you. So if you really, really, really want to make sure that your position doesn't prevail, attack the person. It's guaranteed. You will not win them over. If you want a shot to change someone's mind, Tom's made the point it's tough to do, but if you want even a chance, the best and probably only shot you have is to attack the program, the policies, the outcomes, the positions, not the person. Ask the person where they're coming from, be curious, not furious, invite conversation, state your claim, speak your truth, advocate for your point of view, but do not attack the other person. It is guaranteed, almost guaranteed, to make your point of view fail.
I should have thought ahead of time. There's a great quote from Lincoln on this, talking about that the only way you persuade people to change their mind is if you are their friend. So there's got to be that sort of connection there. So
There are a couple of questions
the
about...
snarky answer to that is
go ahead.
about cleansing the temple. You can do that if you're Jesus.
Yeah.
That's a better answer.
That's the Jesus exception.
That's
You
what I
can do
meant to
that.
say.
I'm not Jesus, so I don't do that.
There are a couple of questions relating to a point you both made about reaching across to others who are different, and your thing about taking someone who's a MAGA supporter to lunch. But a couple of questions just about the difficulty of that, given that we live in silos, we're very separate. Someone asked about our Christian denominations tend to be very separate politically. You have more or less blue or red denominations. Just thoughts about how we really can effectively reach out in light of those kind of limits.
Well, you've got to be intentional, and it's countercultural, right? Everything in our culture is leading to silos and divisions. If you want to do the high-minded stuff I'm talking about, we need to get outside our comfort zone. We need to be intentional about this. So that means you need to seek out people that you're probably not going to run into at church or in your social circle. So it's a real effort to do that. So.
Well, I don't have to reach out very far. It's my own family. So, but that's true of like 100 million of us. Roughly 100 million Americans have ended a relationship in their family or amongst close friends because of politics, because of not because of differences of opinion. I've had differences of opinion in my family since I was born. We have never been split until the last 5 years, where people refuse to talk to each other and don't want to be in the same room together. That never happened until the last 5 years. The differences of opinion is not new. The animosity towards one another is new. So if you want, in my case, and this is true of many of us, many Americans, you don't have to go looking for a MAGA or something to take to lunch. You can just take your cousin to lunch.
But my cousin isn't a cabinet secretary.
Well, that's to your advantage. But all I mean is that these differences are often closer than we realize. And, yeah.
King was famously saying the most segregated hour in America is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning.
Right.
The question about denominations, that's what's happening, I think, now in American Protestant life anyway. That congregations are becoming more separated on these issues.
Theo, can I put in a plug for a group that I'm not officially part of, but you've probably heard of it, that does this as well as anyone? It's Better Angels. Braver Angels. They used to be Better Angels. They had changed. Go look. If you don't know them, look them up. But this is what they do. They get together reds and blues to debate issues, and they teach you how to debate properly. And the point is, no one changes their mind about the issue they're debating. Almost everyone changes their mind about the people with whom they're debating, and that's the key. So if you have a family that doesn't discuss politics or they all get along, check out Braver Angels. They're here, chapters everywhere, easy to join, and a powerful group for good in this.
They are on the list of resources we're going to talk about in a minute, one of many groups doing wonderful work. A final question, as we are about out of time. Tim, you talked about the contempt industrial complex. I like that phrase. Just thoughts about combating that, how we challenge that. I know some people have talked about bans on social media. I heard Governor Cox talk about that the other night. Just thoughts in general about how we, maybe as individuals, can turn away from some of this contempt complex.
Yeah, well, I think some of it's just common sense, but some of it is the retraining of our, this guy told me the other day, a very prominent Silicon Valley guy, billionaire, 32 years old, 3 companies later, and all that kind of stuff. He said, the current generation of people in technology have the goal of colonizing your inner life. Okay. So there's someone trying to colonize my inner life. I need to develop strategies to resist the colonizer. Some of that will just be, I hate to say it, old-fashioned self-regulation. When you reach down and some resistance to the temptation that the addictive quality of social media creates. How do you resist if you were addicted? If you were talking to someone in your family who struggled with addiction and went into recovery, how did they do it? Usually they bottomed out in some way. Usually someone held them while they bottomed out and said, I'm with you, we're going to recover from this. This is the kind of work we now have to do. It's nice to say just ban it or don't watch it or turn it off or get off Instagram or Facebook, whatever it is. I think it's a little unrealistic. We've got to figure out how to be aware of the ways in which the toxin seeps into our work and try to manage our attention. I hate to say it sounds sort of effete or something, but I think that's the new prize. And I think religions, by the way, I think in many ways are well suited to this. If they would recover from within their own traditions, from the C.S. Lewis's and the Mertons, all the people we're hearing about tonight, the kind of scholarship and teaching that comes from those pieces of the puzzle in our past that have primarily taught us how to find the inner strength to be able to be attentive to the presence of God. This current Pope says that his favorite text, I don't know how many of you know Brother Lawrence, but Brother Lawrence has this beautiful text called The Practice of the Presence. Practice of the Presence of God. That's, in my view, when I think we actually could teach the world, not the practice of the creed or the practice of the Augsburg Declaration or the practice of Nicaea, but the practice of the presence of God.
So judges are supposed to have something called a judicial temperament. That means you're supposed to be even-keeled, look at the evidence on both sides, render dispassionate judgment based on law. Okay. Well, I'm not a judge anymore. Okay, so I don't have to be. My hair is on fire. The house is on fire. It's burning down, folks, and it's social media. It's doing it. In my view, this is the compelling issue of our time. It is literally ruining our inner lives, everything about us. And to me, we can't be dispassionate about this. And this is not a partisan issue, right? This ought to, if you're looking for a populist issue, at the other evening at the cathedral when the governors took on social media company, they got the biggest positive response from that, from everyone there. So yeah, I'm saying I'm Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and it's because of social media. I'm not certain of the policy resolve to it, but the policy solutions to it. But I do think there needs to be a sense of urgency, both in our individual lives. Get off it. No, stop it. No, just stop doing it. You don't need it. You got along with it fine before. Get off it now, and then we need to figure out policies, what sorts of regulations are needed to combat this. But we need to do it urgently.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to take just a moment, share some information with you about building upon this experience tonight, and then we'll come back in just a moment and have just a final word from our guests as we close. This is one of those issues where we all have a role to play. Sometimes we look at something and we go, there's nothing I can do about that. But what is political climate in a country but the sole makeup, the composition of what everybody does as an individual. So each of us contributes one way or another to the climate in the country and the question of whether there is dignity or contempt. We gave a flyer to you when you came in, those who are here, those online, as I mentioned earlier. We sent a link earlier today. You can click on that link in the announcement you got, and it will give you the same information. These are just some suggestions of things, and I invite you to look at them now. And as you see, the very first one is turn away from contempt-based media, and some suggestions on how you can just take charge of your own life. Turn towards others of difference. We talked about looking for ways to do that and having to take initiative to do it. And then the third thing is to take the dignity pledge. Look at the wording of the dignity pledge. I'm even going to read it. It's really beautiful. As an American who knows and loves my country, I am convinced there is no America without democracy, no democracy without healthy debate, and no healthy debate without dignity. Therefore, I pledge to do more to treat others with dignity, not contempt. Very simple but profound for us all to think about that as we participate. And then, of course, the fourth thing listed here is tell your leaders that this matters. You talked about pushing back on people who, elected officials who are contemptuous. So some good suggestions of that. And on the back, there are some resources of some of the groups that really can help you develop skills or can plug you into networks of people. And then there is also something I want to call your attention to, both here and for folks online. It's a little self-assessment. Take a couple of minutes and read through some of these questions. See how you're doing. All of us can improve the way we think about others. One of my favorite ones on the self-assessment one is, how often do I find myself focusing on the most extreme or outrageous ideas and people on the other side, therefore making it hard to see how a reasonable person could be in that group? Don't we do that? We start talking about the other side and we hold up the very most extreme person we can think of and make it sound like everybody is like that on the other side, when of course it's much more nuanced. So reflect on your own situation and role and look at some resources here that you may want to take to help you as you interact with others. In addition to the other invitation is to take the Dignity Pledge. You see the email up on the screen right now, and you can go there and take the pledge and learn more about how to apply it in your life. And I urge you to learn more about the Dignity Index and the work of the organization Unite. I also want to thank our program partners again. I mentioned them earlier. We have National Institute for Civil Discourse. Here is their website. They are dedicated to building the nation's capacity to engage differences more constructively. And then the Wheatley Institute at BYU, which works to strengthen society through fortifying the core institutions of family, religion, and government. We thank them for their help with this program. And finally, I have a quick announcement about our upcoming McClendon Scholar programs. We have two to announce. We have an agreement with Senator Coons' office that he will come and speak as a McClendon Scholar in January. We had him several years ago. He made a wonderful presentation, a good Presbyterian deacon, and we look forward to having him again in January. We don't have an exact date yet, but we'll share that with you as soon as we have it. And then on February 24th, we'll have a program with Eugene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize winner from the Washington Post, a well-known political commentator, and he has a new book on his own family and his own family in the light of Black history in the United States. And this program will be at Metropolitan AME Church. It's always a joy to partner with Metropolitan AME, and it'll be up there on M Street in February 24th. So finally, just our website. You can anytime learn more about our past programs and future ones. You see the website there, nyapc.org/MSIR. Thank you again for being here this evening. I want to just take a moment then and invite Tim and Tom to make a brief comment, what thought they want to leave with us, and then David will close with the benediction.
So In the summer of 1787, when the Constitution of the United States was created, you may remember the story. Things weren't going well at the convention, and in July it looked like it was going to fall apart, right? And yet by September they had pulled it off. How did they do that? How did they do that? Well, there's one popular history of the time that's called the miracle at Philadelphia. The miracle at Philadelphia. Well, I'm a Christian. I believe in miracles. I understand miracle to be something that defies rational explanation. I can't explain the bodily resurrection of Jesus, so I believe it. Well, by that definition, it was not a miracle that happened that summer. We know exactly what happened because George Washington told us. In the letter transmitting the Constitution to the Continental Congress, he said these words: "This Constitution is the result of a spirit of amity, and that mutual deference and concession which the peculiarity of our political circumstances rendered indispensable." Amity, deference, concession. That's what founded this country. That's what created the Constitution. It's my belief that unless we rediscover those virtues, amity, deference, and concession, it will not survive. It's my hope and prayer that people of goodwill like you throughout the country will reclaim those virtues and apply them, because the circumstances of our political circumstances rendered them today indispensable. So. Thank you.
I guess I'll close with a recognition that there's a lot of heartbreak in a room like this and in our country right now. Are we going to make it? You know, the way things are going, are we okay? You know, are we okay? There's a lot of fear. We might not be okay. This might not work. It's just gotten too ugly. And I honestly, it makes me extremely, it's painful. I grew up in this town. I grew up around people who were so frickin' optimistic. They believed, my parents, the people around me, who just believed so much. Peace. We could make economic justice. We could heal the problems of racism and indifference. We could break down those walls of those institutions. That's all I knew about the United States. Really, it's the only thing I believed growing up. We could do it. I still believe that, but I just want to say to everybody, if you're feeling a little bit of like, this sucks, I hear you. But this is our moment, you know? It's not all that story. I mentioned Governor Herbert here. I have been a student of his. He led the state of Utah, elected twice, successful, prominent, nationally important political leader, conservative in principle, open in process, and moderate in tone. How'd I do? That's a winning formula. Vote for people like that. Vote for people like that. You might want to change progressive in principle, but everybody can be moderate in tone, everybody can be inclusive in process, and everyone can win that way. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that, you know, I mentioned earlier that I've learned as much from Loretta as almost anybody in my life. You know, Loretta, so many different things Loretta has said to me over the years, you know, focus on my ability. That's kind of, Tom, what I heard you say, you know. Go to lunch with someone. Don't ask what they watched on Fox News. Just ask what they're good at. You know, focus on my ability. The focus on the disability put hundreds of thousands of people away. The focus on the ability made them into champions. You know, it's a shift of mind. It's a kind of a conversion that we're all being challenged to do. And maybe this is our time. I actually think we're at a tipping point, and I think we're going to We're going to get this done. But if you came here tonight a little bit pissed off and a little bit scared and a little bit angry and a little bit afraid, that's me too. And I hope you leave tonight a little bit stronger and a little bit more confident in each other and a little bit more convinced we can do this. So thank you.
In the Christian liturgical calendar, we're at a tipping point. It's called Advent. And there's a word from the prophet Isaiah that's always spoken at this time. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. I came across a Celtic blessing I want to end tonight with. May the blessing of light be on you. Light without and light within. May the blessed sunlight shine on you like a great peat fire, so that stranger and friend may come and warm themselves at it. And may light shine out of the two eyes of you, like a candle set in the window of a house, bidding the wanderer come in out of the storm. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
I'm sorry making that comment about Bobby.
Oh, no.